The mountain village of Mirovia clung to a saddle of green between granite peaks, and dawn always arrived wrapped in the mingled perfumes of yeast and wood smoke. On the eastern end of the square stood Dove's Hearth, a sturdy stone bakery whose chimney puffed rhythmic clouds like a metronome. On the western end rose Van's Oven, painted the color of alpine gentians, its shutters flung open to broadcast cinnamon fragrance. Each sunrise began with the same unspoken ritual. Peregrine Dove would fling open his door exactly 9 heartbeats after Celeste Yvonne revealed hers, so their smells collided in midair like two armies meeting on an invisible battlefield. Children placed bets on whose steam would reach the fountain first. Older folks simply chose sides and queued accordingly. No one precisely remembered how the feud started. Some claimed that 50 years earlier, Peregrine's grandmother accused Celestia's grandfather of stealing a secret sourdough starter. Others insisted a spoiled batch of rye buns had ruined a wedding and each family blamed the other. By the time the current bakers inherited the ovens, the grievance had hardened into custom. Dove customers never crossed Van's threshold. Van loyalists would rather chew granite than swallow a Dove croissant. And because both breads were genuinely superb, the schism became more stubborn, not less. Pride tasted delicious. Most days, the rivalry played out in harmless one-upmanship. Extra curls of butter on a Dove brioche, an unexpected swirl of honey through a Van baguette. Yet every spring, the Equinox Festival stoked the embers into roaring flame. The festival's baking contest offered a single chalice-shaped trophy, the spun silver spoon, awarded to whatever loaf best captured the spirit of Mirovia. Whoever held it for the year could display the spoon in the front window, draw tourists, and bask in municipal admiration. Dove's Hearth and Van's Oven had traded the trophy back and forth for a decade. Villagers secretly loved the spectacle, but even they had begun to mutter that constant competition left everyone exhausted. That year, Mayor Alicio himself, fond of both rye and brioche and tired of dodging loyalists, altered the rules. No ordinary loaf may claim the spun silver spoon, he announced from the bandstand. The winning bread must do more than please the tongue. It must inspire harmony among neighbors. The crowd buzzed. Harmony? In a town that arranged dinner invitations by bakery allegiance, harmony sounded like a fairy tale. Nonetheless, the directive was clear. Bake unity itself or concede. Peregrine Dove, broad-shouldered and flame-hailed, took the challenge as a personal crusade. Nightly, he pored over his grandmother's journals, pausing each time her spidery script mentioned cantabile crumb, or loaves that sing. One entry intrigued him most, a sketch of stalks labeled winseed wheat, which supposedly grew only in the echo caves high above the tree line. According to legend, the grain trapped mountain breezes in its hollow cores, and when baked just so, the bread released the stored music. The slice becomes a hymn, grandmother had written. If such a thing were possible, surely it could unify a village. Across the square, Celestia Van, silver-eyed and quick as frost, traced her own lineage through a collection of parchment scrolls wrapped in lavender cloth. Her ancestor, Mira Van, had once journeyed to the Resonance Cliffs, seeking salt of reverberation, crystals that vibrated when struck. Mira's notes described combining the salt with dough to create lattices of sound. Celestia tried envisioning how salt could sing, but the poetry of the idea thrilled her. If Mayor Alicia wanted harmony, why not literal harmony? Both bakers understood that ordinary supplies from the mill and market would not suffice. So on a misty morning, 3 weeks before the festival, Peregrine strapped a pack to his shoulders and set off up the goat track toward Windcrest Ridge, where the Echo Caves waited. He told no one, fearing Celestia might intercept the idea. He did not know Celestia had departed at dawn by the northern switchback, seeking the same caves from a different angle. Fate, however, enjoys colliding intentions as much as Moravian air enjoys colliding scents. The two rivals met halfway up the mountain at a narrow ledge called the Lark's Stair. Fog blew in ragged sheets across the path, and scree shifted under every step. Peregrine rounded a bend and nearly collided with Celestia, whose charcoal cloak blended into the rock. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other, then at the identical tools peeking from their packs, hand scythes, muslin bags, flasks of spring water. "You're following me," the baker said in unison, then grimaced at the cemetery. "Go home, Dove," Celestia snapped first. "Your customers will miss their daily sugar crust." "Go home, Van," Peregrine retorted. "You'll catch a chill and oversalt your dough again." They might have bickered until nightfall, but the sky darkened with muttering thunder. Mountain storms respected no feud. A cold gust swept upward, nearly unseating Celestia. Without thinking, Peregrine grasped her arm, and her surprised eyes met his. Practicality trumped pride. Sharing one rope and two stubborn wills, they climbed to the cave mouth moments before rain hammered the slope. Inside, the echo caves stirred with eerie life. Every drip of water struck stone and replicated itself down passage after passage until a single drop sounded like an applauding audience. In the flicker of Celestia's lantern, they saw patches of pale wheat, stems hollow as reeds, swaying, though no breeze reached them. The air itself felt tuned, humming faintly in the chest, like distant cello strings. They worked side by side in uneasy truce, cutting wheat and pouring seeds into their muslin bags. Celestia found clusters of crystalline flakes along the walls, resonant salt, and tapped them with her trowel. Each tap emitted a bell-like ping. She glanced at Peregrine, who chewed his lip, torn between envy and admiration. The cavern's acoustics amplified every emotion. When their bags were full, the storm still raged, stranding them. They huddled near a cleft where warm air seeped upward, perhaps from some subterranean spring. Conversation, like dough, rose despite resistance. Your grandmother's notes mention this place? Celestia asked, tracing a salt crystal with her thumb. Peregrine nodded. She called it the breath of the mountain, said bread baked with windseed could sing. Celestia produced a water-worn scroll. Miravan wrote similar words, but with emphasis on salt. My ancestor claimed the crystals vibrated at specific frequencies that remain trapped in dough until sliced. That slicing releases the tone. They fell silent, realizing they each held half a riddle. Outside, thunder rolled like a massive drum. Inside, a smaller storm churned. Suspicion or collaboration? Peregrine extended a calloused palm. Truce until we get off this peak. After that, we can duel with baguettes again. Celestia considered, then shook his hand. Lightning illuminated their clasped fingers, sealing something more potent than they yet understood. The storm eased near dawn. They descended together, fatigue eroding sarcasm, and parted at the village outskirts with brief, awkward nods. Yet once apart, both bakers discovered the same obstacle. Either ingredient alone produced nothing extraordinary. Peregrine milled his winseed into flour and baked rustic boules that tasted sweetly of pine but offered no music. Celestia ground her resonant salt into the dough of a plated loaf. Upon slicing, the crust merely crackled. The magic required union. For 3 sleepless nights, Peregrine argued with himself whether to approach Celestia. On the 4th dawn, he found her waiting outside Dove's hearth, a basket of failed loaves at her feet. Enough pride, she said without greeting. My salt needs your wheat, and your wheat needs my salt. Mayor Eliseo wants unity. Let's show him. Peregrine's laughter rumbled like distant ovens. Come inside, Van, but mind you, I still reserve the right to despise your scones. Agreed, she smiled. I remain unimpressed by your eclairs. They locked the door, shuttered the windows, and began the most delicate dance either had known. First, they experimented with ratios, 2 cups winseed flour to 1 teaspoon resonant salt, then 3 to 2, then a pinch of sea salt for baseline. They discovered the dough had to be kneaded gently, lest unseen air pockets burst prematurely. During proofing, the loaves emitted soft whistling as though rehearsing. They argued about crust thickness. Peregrine favored hearty, Celestia preferred thin, about scoring patterns, her swirls versus his decisive slashes, about baking temperature. Yet every clash ended in laughter, surprising them. The rivalry that once tasted acrid now fizzed like good lemonade. Unity, it turned out, rose when 2 kinds of stubbornness warmed in proximity. At last, near midnight 2 days before the festival, they slid a braided boule into the wood-fired oven. Celestia tuned her ear to the flames. Peregrine watched the dough bloom. When the timer sand trickled out, they transferred the loaf to a pine board and waited until steam ceased to hiss, their breathing synchronized. Peregrine lifted a blade. The first slice parted the crust with a hushed zither sound. Then, from the crumb, a note floated high, clear, like a lark greeting dawn. Celestia gasped. Peregrine sliced again. The next tone harmonized a third below. Each subsequent cut produced another pitch, forming a simple, ancient melody recognizable to every Moravian child, the cradle song, Mountain Mother. By the time the 11th slice fell, the bread itself had sung the full lullaby. They stared at the board strewn with melodic crumbs, mouths open. It works, Celestia whispered. It lives, Peregrine corrected, eyes shining. They decided secrecy was paramount. The festival demanded public presentation, but premature rumors could spark sabotage or unrealistic expectations. Celestia suggested baking not one show loaf, but dozens, so every household might taste and hear simultaneously. Peregrine agreed. The bread's power lay in shared experience. For 48 hours, they scarcely left the hearth. Village gossips noted only that both chimneys smoked more furiously than ever. At night, faint chords drifted through shutter cracks, yet listeners assumed the wind played tricks. Children pressed ears to doors and swore they heard lullabies. Adults said they dreamed of music-scented bread. Finally, sunrise of the Equinox Festival painted the peaks rose gold. The square blossomed with stalls, banners, fiddlers tuning strings. At the center, upon a linen-draped table, Mayor Elysia waited beside the spun silver spoon. Dove loyalists wore badges of red wool. Van supporters sported blue ribbons. Their glares could have curdled milk. When the town clock told 10, Peregrine and Celestia emerged side by side, pushing a cart piled high with covered baskets. A hush fell that tasted like shock mixed with curiosity. They wheeled the cart to the mayor, uncovered the topmost basket, and revealed plump golden loaves scored with intertwined vines, dove slashes meeting Van swirls. Mayor Alicio blinked. Together? Together, they said. They offered him the knife. Please slice. The mayor, palms sweating, cut into the crust. A single note chimed, soft but piercing, the exact pitch of the bronze bell that called farmers from fields at sunset. The crowd froze. He sliced again. Another note joined, forming an interval that resonated in lungs and memory alike. Murmurs rose, gasps, laughter, muffled tears. With each slice, the lullaby unfurled until the entire square reverberated. Birds on rooftops tilted heads, confused by competition from bread. Sound knows no tribal colors. Red tag Dove supporters and blue ribbon Van loyalists found tunes unlocking childhood evenings when mothers, regardless of bakery preference, sang the same song beside fireplaces. One elderly woman clutching a Dove brioche reached instinctively for her neighbor, a steadfast Van patron. Their hands met over the table. Children too young to remember the feud began humming along, then singing lyrics. Mountain Mother, hold us high, cradle us where eagles fly. As music faded with the final slice, silence lingered, not awkward, but reverent. Then applause erupted, washing the square clean of rivalry. Even the peaks seemed to echo cheers. Mayor Alicio wiped eyes and attempted dignity. I believe we have our winners. He lifted the spun silver spoon, but paused. 2 bakers, 1 trophy. How shall you divide it? Celestio glanced at Peregrine. He nodded. Together they lifted the trophy and placed it upright in the cart, half burying the handle in warm crumbs, so it gleamed like a scepter in a golden field. It belongs to the bread, Peregrine declared. And the bread belongs to Morovia, Celestia added. The mayor grinned. Then Morovia thanks you. Would you grace us with enough loaves for all? Already the cart brimmed with supply. They circulated through the square, letting townsfolk take turns slicing. Each loaf sang not only the lullaby, but sometimes variations, snatches of harvest reels, winter carols, courting songs, depending on how tension formed in that particular crumb. By noon, families who had not shared a table in generations were passing butter dishes and finishing each other's harmonies. After the festival, the question remained, what next? Dove's hearth and Van's oven still faced each other across the square, 2 proud structures with histories baked into brick. But that evening, when lamps glowed amber, Peregrine hammered a new sign above his door, the United Hearth. Celestia followed, painting over gentian blue shutters with a gradient of red, merging to purple, merging to midnight, no longer claiming exclusive color. The next morning, both bakers unlocked one shared entrance. Patrons crossed former lines, some hesitant, most giddy. The first loaf purchased was a singing bull named Harmony. It performed the village anthem when sliced precisely 7 times. Because peace, like dough, can collapse if neglected, Peregrine and Celestia safeguarded their process. Winseed wheat could be harvested only under crescent moons to prevent premature resonance. Resonance salt required aging in cedar boxes lined with wool to keep crystals pure. They pledged to teach apprentices from both former factions in pairs, neither learning alone, so knowledge itself relied on cooperation. In the months that followed, other villages sent emissaries hoping to purchase or steal the secret. Peregrine and Celestia greeted each politely, served ordinary bread, and explained that Merovia's singing loaves were less recipe than relationship. Without mutual trust, the wheat fell silent and the salt turned dull. Few believed them, though occasionally a traveler left thinking harder about whom they broke bread with. The older generation, initially worried that a peace built on novelty might crumble like overproof dough, but each dawn renewed conviction, for the very square that once showcased dueling aromas now swelled with a single fragrance. The smell of union, warm and fragrant as a lullaby, extended into daylight. Couples from opposing families married that autumn under garlands woven from straw and salt crystals. During vows, the officiant sliced a harmony loaf, so melodies filled the chapel instead of organ pipes. Babies born the next spring were rocked to sleep by actual bread music more often than by tin whistles. As for the bakers working shoulder to shoulder, revealed compatibilities deeper than flour and salt. Celestia admired Peregrine's patience with slow starters. He cherished her fearless spice experiments. Disagreements, when they arose, usually ended in tasteful compromise. Cardamom brioche scored both boldly and elegantly, or rye-blended baguettes with playful swirl patterns. On winter nights, they sat by the cooling ovens, swapping stories of grandparents and the long chain of hands that formed them. Somewhere between laughter and flame, light, enmity cools into affection, the same way crust cools into tenderness. One evening, exactly a year after that fateful climb, they returned to the Echo Caves, this time side by side and unafraid of storms. They harvested windseed and resonant salt, while the cavern's echoes greeted them like old friends. Before leaving, they placed a loaf on a stone altar and sliced it, letting its song mingle with the cavern's eternal chorus. The bread sang of beginnings, endings, and everything that rises when two simple ingredients refuse to remain separate. Back in Morovia, folks say on crystal clear mornings, the entire valley still hums with those combined notes, though science insists it is merely air passing through pine boughs. But anyone who tasted the bread that day, who felt rifts close inside them with each melodic crumb, knows better. They know a mountain once taught stubborn hearts to pause, listen, and knead their differences into harmony. And every equinox, when Mayor Alicio dusts off the spun silver spoon for display, he no longer calls for rivalry. Instead, he invites the village choir of children, chosen equally from every lineage, to stand on the bandstand. At his signal, they slice a ceremonial harmony loaf. As the first bright note arcs skyward, the children begin to sing, "Mountain, Mother, hold us high." In that moment, bread, melody, and memory intertwine, and the village of Merovia, nestled between echoing peaks, remembers that unity, like yeast, may be invisible but never inactive. All it needs is warmth, patience, and the courage to mix what once refused to mingle.